Fallout 3 is often judged for what it isn't. Not as reactive as the originals, not as deep, not as complex. Often overshadowed by the idea that Fallout New Vegas is the best Fallout game, a claim repeated almost as gospel. But that framing misses something important, because Fallout 3 was never trying to be Fallout 1 or 2. It was trying to be an evolution, merging those ideas with Bethesda's vision of a living, immersive, explorable world. And the result is a game where something is undeniably lost, but something equally important is gained. A 2008 first-person action RPG set in the post-apocalyptic world, one bold enough to incorporate shooter and immersive sim elements into the mix. This game marks the beginning of the Fallout franchise's rebirth. It's a bridge between the old, classic isometric games and the expansive, immersive Bethesda products. And to be honest with you, I genuinely like this game. I love the hybrid approach they took, merging the immersion and freedom of the signature games with a lot of the character depth and setting of the first titles. But this doesn't mean Fallout 3 doesn't have its own problems. I played this game numerous times over the years, since back when it came out. It was a huge success back then, with contemporary reviews praising its graphics and the sheer dimension of the map, a place where there is always something to discover. I like to play a game series in order, and having already covered Fallout 1 and 2, it felt high time I continued the journey. As a proper Bethesda sandbox game, in Fallout 3 you can be pretty much whoever you want to be. You can be a paladin in shining armor, literally, intent on saving the wasteland from itself, or a truly despicable person capable of nuking a settlement and having others invaded and their people killed or enslaved. But this freedom clashes with certain main story moments that, in my opinion, simply don't hold up if you're playing an evil character. I believe this game truly shines when you wear your shiny armor and start helping every single person in need you meet, and there are a lot of them out there. Before diving in, let me briefly introduce myself. I'm a completionist gamer who plays Western RPGs to full completion, regardless of their age or production size. I usually experience video games through multiple playthroughs, stopping only when I feel I've seen everything a game has to offer. For Fallout 3, I set a few goals for myself while recording my last playthrough of it, collecting every bobblehead, crafting every custom weapon, visiting every location on the map, doing all the side quests when possible, and playing all the DLCs. This run took a grand total of 150 hours, and despite my already confessed love for this game, while I was blasting the last aliens to ash in Mothership Zeta, I was starting to feel some wear and tear. Bethesda games arguably weren't designed with the completionist in mind. I believe Fallout 3's main story can be finished in about 20 hours if you just focus on it, but you'll be missing a lot. This game is full of memorable side quests and places that you won't explore if you stay laser focused on the main objective. It's worth derailing from the main path, and to rephrase the goal from the TV series, remember the Wasteland Golden Rule, you'll always be sidetracked by something else. So, without further ado, let's dive in. To understand how Fallout 3 came to be and the evolution it was, I strongly believe it's important to know how the franchise was born in the first place, so allow me some of your time to go back for a few moments. The Fallout story starts with Interplay Productions, a company founded in Los Angeles by 4 people. Among them was a well-known name, Brian Fargo. His company was a major developer and publisher throughout the 80s and 90s, developing its own games and publishing titles from other studios. Just to name a few, they developed and published the original Wasteland and published Descent by Parallax Software. Over time, Interplay expanded and created an internal division focused entirely on RPG development, Black Isle Studios, another name we CRPG fans know very well. To give a picture of how interconnected things were, a big classic like Baldur's Gate was developed by BioWare and published by Interplay, while Baldur's Gate 2 was published by Black Isle. Planescape Torment was developed by Black Isle using BioWare's Infinity Engine and published by Interplay. The same structure applied to the Icewind Dale series. As for Fallout itself, the first title was developed internally and published by Interplay, while Fallout 2 was developed by Black Isle and, again, published by Interplay. In many ways, all the great CRPGs of that era did come from the same place. I'm personally attached to Interplay because of a much more obscure title they developed, J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings Volume 1. It was the first computer RPG I ever played. I was about 9 years old, I believe, playing it on my dad's 286, which rocked MS-DOS and Windows 3.1. I became slightly obsessed with it. I even remember dreaming about it. At the same time, parts of it genuinely scared me, since the game could be pretty dark. Sometimes I would just sit there watching my dad play, unknowingly telling him what to do and how to do it, as kids tend to do. The game had some things in common with Ultima 6: The False Prophet, and interestingly, both were released in the same year, 1990. That game was formative for me. It pushed me to read The Lord of the Rings when I was 10, opening the door to fantasy literature. And because the game was entirely in English, using a text parser for dialogue, it also forced me to start learning the language at a very young age. And they say video games are a waste of time. That game was my introduction to RPGs, a passion that only grew over the next 30-something years. Eventually, though, Interplay began to struggle. A couple of years after Black Isle was created, the company entered a difficult period. Brian Fargo later described it as tough and not very fun. The industry was changing, development costs were rising, and PC gaming was starting to lose ground to consoles. Interplay's games were often critically acclaimed, but not always commercially successful. The cancellation of Star Trek: The Secret of Vulcan Fury and the commercial failure of Free Space 2, despite its cult following, were significant setbacks for the company. Black Isle was still performing relatively well, largely thanks to the Dungeons & Dragons license and the quality of its games. But Interplay's problems started affecting them too. In July 2001, an RPG called Thorn was cancelled, and Black Isle experienced its first layoffs. Josh Sawyer recalled being told by Fergus Urquhart that Thorn was gone, and that they needed to develop Icewind Dale 2 in just a few months. And that's when things started to crumble. Teams were getting smaller, pressure was increasing, and people began to leave. We should also remember the legendary figure of Tim Kaine, one of Fallout's original creators, who left Interplay during the development of Fallout 2, largely due to insane working conditions. Leonard Boarski followed shortly after. Together with Jason Anderson, they went on to found Troika Games, which later developed Arcanum, The Temple of Elemental Evil, and Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Despite that, they pushed forward, and during those uncertain years, one project kept the studio going: Van Buren, the original Fallout 3. Fergus Urquhart knew the situation was critical, but still wanted to see the project through. Chris Avellone spent years working on its design. The team even developed its own engine, what's known as the Jefferson Engine, aiming to build what they believed could be their best game ever. Van Buren was ambitious. It would have featured both turn-based and real-time combat, set in the American Southwest, bordering the new California Republic territory. It would have allowed players to choose to play a human, a ghoul, or a super mutant. The story revolved around a prisoner escaping captivity, facing a threat tied to the forced evolutionary virus and pre-war technology. But the studio was already collapsing. Sawyer was pulled off another project, Baldur's Gate 3: The Black Hound, which was put on pause. Shortly after, it was cancelled following the loss of the D&D license, a devastating loss for the company. Van Buren became the focus, but by then, too many key people had already left. By 2002, the exodus had begun. Brian Fargo resigned first, then Fergus Urquhart in early 2003, with Chris Avellone following shortly after. Avellone has since explained that after seeing multiple projects cancelled, he no longer believed the studio would survive long enough to finish Van Buren. Together, Avellone and Urquhart went on to found Obsidian Entertainment, now widely considered the spiritual successor to Black Isle. Sawyer stayed a bit longer, still trying to push Van Buren forward, but the lack of support from upper management made the situation untenable. When even his best artist was reassigned, that was enough. He resigned at the end of 2003 and joined Obsidian as well. Van Buren was never completed, but some of its ideas found their way into Fallout New Vegas, where Obsidian managed, in a way, to carry part of that original vision forward. But this is a topic for another time. Interplay continued its decline, and eventually began selling off its assets. Now, I should briefly mention two other entries that came out during this period. In 2001, Fallout Tactics was released, a squad-based tactical game developed by Microforte and published through 14 Degrees East, a division of Interplay. It was reasonably well received at the time, but fans came to regard it as the black sheep of the classic era. It was considered a strategy game, not an RPG, and that came with a cost. Then in 2004, as Interplay's lights were going out, came Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, a console action game and the last title Interplay would release under the Fallout name. That one was received very poorly, by critics and fans alike, and put the final nail in the coffin of the series under Interplay. Todd Howard later said that for Bethesda's purposes, neither of them happened. I won't go much farther than that. And this is where we reach our story's conclusion. Bethesda secured an exclusive licensing agreement for the development of Fallout 3 in 2004, and bought the full rights for the franchise in 2007. And that's where the franchise changes. It was dead and buried in everything but the name. The Fallout that emerged from this transition was not just a continuation, it was a transformation, an evolution. If you want to play Fallout 3 today, getting it is quite easy. I play on PC, and the Game of the Year edition can be found on Steam and GOG at a low price, often bundled with other games of the series. This edition includes all 5 DLCs the game received over time. I didn't have any problem running Fallout 3 on a modern machine with Windows 11 installed, but some people online report frequent crashes and find it nearly unplayable without mods that fixes specific problems. Your mileage may vary. Speaking of mods, it's a Bethesda game, so obviously there are a bajillion mods for it out there, from graphical updates to mechanical alterations. For a lot of players, heavily modding a Bethesda game is part of the fun, so it's worth mentioning my approach here. For this retrospective, I exclusively played the vanilla version of the game, since I found it perfectly playable. Speaking from my own experience, the game crashed on me sporadically when I alt-tabbed to take notes, which is not unusual for an old game that doesn't include the borderless window display option. Other mild annoyances include the lack of a sprint button and the character occasionally sliding forward after releasing the movement keys instead of stopping immediately. It's like there is a slight delay for movement input, but you get used to it after a while. The more significant friction point is the Pip-Boy, the wrist-mounted computer that serves as your interface for everything character-related. Inventory, stats, health, karma, skills, maps, journal. It's a clever bit of world building and genuinely iconic, but navigating it in practice is cumbersome. Every menu interaction requires opening the whole device, and once inside, you're working through several layers of submenus to find what you need, where a more conventional RPG would just let you press C for your character sheet, or I for your inventory. I use the F1 to F4 shortcuts a lot, but there are still plenty of submenus to dig through. For how immediate and immersive the game is in so many other respects, this part of the experience feels surprisingly janky, and given how often you're there, it adds up. I get it, having a nuclear-powered mini-PC strapped to your wrist is part of the fantasy, and the Pip-Boy is one of the most recognizable symbols of the franchise. But immersion and usability should find some sort of balance, and Fallout 3 never manages that. Besides these annoyances and my little rant on the Pip-Boy, the game provided me with a smooth experience overall, so let's get into how the game opens. We're offered the first-person view of ourselves, just emerged from our mother's womb, and our father, voiced by Liam Neeson, immediately uses an advanced gene projection device to see what we'll look like when we grow up. Sadly, our mother dies of childbirth complications, but it's a brilliant immersive way to choose your character's appearance. That being said, the choices are limited. We have a few face presets to work on, choosing hair and beard styles among a small set. The game features a third-person view if you're so inclined, just like Oblivion did, but it's generally very janky and let's be honest, Bethesda's games are meant to be played in first-person view, so you're probably never going to see how your character's face actually looks. A much more important aspect of character creation is choosing your attributes, and again, the game chooses to gradually expose you to the fundamental mechanics in an immersive way. The first 15 or 20 minutes of the game are spent living your character's childhood in chunks, getting your feet wet with the game's basic mechanics. At first, we see ourselves as a toddler, left in a child pen by our father. The cool thing here is that our father looks a little like us, depending on the appearance choices we just made. It's a little detail, but a nice touch. While he lives for a while, we learn the basics of movement and interacting with the environment by escaping the pen and grabbing our special playbook. From this book, we'll choose our character attributes, which are the same as the original Fallout: strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, and luck. I won't bother you with the specifics, but it's worth noting that not all specials are created equal. For example, intelligence, yet another throwback to the isometric titles, influences how many skill points you get to distribute at every level up. So it's best to have a high intelligence value right from the start to maximize your total skill points. It's not absolutely necessary. You can have a successful run with a low intelligence character, but it will make things considerably harder. After choosing our attributes, the game flashes forward to our 10th birthday party, where we're introduced to some important NPCs from the game's prologue. The Vault Overseer, as a proper slimy politician, interrupts our father to deliver a thoroughly uninspiring speech.
If only your
Congratulations, young man. I don't have to tell you how special this day is, do I? Down here in Vault 101, when you turn 10, well, you're ready to take on your first official Vault responsibilities. So here you are. As Overseer, I hereby present to you your very own Pip-Boy 3000. Get used to it. You'll be getting your first work assignment tomorrow.
At the end of the said party, we're presented with the shooting tutorial with the BB gun, another throwback to the isometric titles and the Red Rider BB gun. The next flash forward brings us to our character at 16, taking the infamous GOAT test, which stands for, hilariously, Generalized Occupational Aptitude Test. We can find the medicine bobblehead right here in the tutorial, and don't worry if you miss it, you can find it again later. The test has you answer a few equally hilarious questions to decide 3 of your skills to be tagged, meaning they will start at a higher value. At the end of the test, you can manually change them anyway, and the game even gives you an in-word reason for it. The instructor is a close friend of your father's, and is happy to quietly adjust your results as a favor. It's a nice immersive way of avoiding a full prologue redo if you're unhappy with the outcome, and a good roleplay moment on top of it. Answering those questions in the wildest way possible can also lead to a fun challenge run. What the tutorial does cleverly is introduce you to these systems gradually, through roleplay rather than menus. But once the prologue ends and the capital wasteland opens up, understanding those systems becomes genuinely important. For this game, Bethesda ditched the use-based skill progression from Morrowind and Oblivion. Instead, it's a more classic experience-based system, where you gradually gain experience points by playing the game naturally. Killing enemies, discovering new locations, lock-picking saves, and hacking into computers all net you experience, and at certain thresholds, you level up. Every level up grants you a set amount of skill points, 10 or 13 if you pick the Educated perk, plus your intelligence score, for a maximum of 23 skill points per level up if you have both the perk and an intelligence score of 10. That's why the intelligence attribute is so important. These points can be freely distributed between all 13 skills at your disposal. Tagged and untagged skills cost the same to increase, and the maximum reachable value is 100. I strongly suggest choosing at least one combat skill, to make your life easier once you're thrown into the capital wasteland. I didn't do it in this footage. I went for a build based on lockpick, science and speech, just what Dad could have taught us. Having experience with the game, I knew how to deal with the slightly more difficult beginning. Every time you level up, you get to choose a perk. Perks are unique abilities or bonuses that enhance combat, skills, or core attributes, acting as modifiers that shape your character's playstyle. They can give you flat skill bonuses, like the Daddy's Boy or Girl perk, adding +5 to your science and medicine skills, or be a mix of bonuses and flavor, like Bloody Mess, which was a trait in the original games but functions as a perk here, and increases your damage by +5% and entails more violent death animations. The game has 58 base perks in total, so I'm not going to list them all. A special mention, in my opinion, goes to the Mysterious Stranger. It adds a chance that a mysterious NPC in a trench coat appears in VATS, the game's targeting system, and finishes off targets. Other perks can be gained through special interactions or finishing certain quests, like adding power armor training from the Brotherhood of Steel. The DLCs also add a few of their own, like the Almost Perfect perk, coming with Broken Steel, which we'll discuss in a moment. Maximum level is 20, and this cap was raised to 30 with the Broken Steel DLC installed. While exploring, you can also find books and magazines that permanently increase specific skills. Bobbleheads permanently increase a special attribute by 1 or a skill by 10. The already mentioned perk Almost Perfect is available once you reach level 30. It raises all your specials to 9, so with some careful planning and exploration, delaying the Bobblehead collection until you reach max level and picking the perk, you can build a Superman with all specials at 10 and nearly all skills maxed. That's pretty dirty and I like it, but it kind of detracts from the game's replayability. Having a character that can do everything. That's the Bethesda conundrum to face in all their RPGs, isn't it? Being a Superman has its trade-offs, but I still end up doing it every time. You don't need this level of min-maxing to successfully play the game, but I find satisfaction in understanding the system and having a truly beefy character. Bethesda games excel in giving you the possibility to live your power fantasy, so why not? Now that we've seen what character creation entails, let's see what happens when the last flash forward puts your character at 19 years of age and the game truly starts. It should go without saying that in this chapter I'm going to thoroughly spoil the main story, so be warned and skip ahead if you prefer. We just lived through our character's first years of life, a part that I really liked because it's an immersive tutorial if I ever saw one. We wake up with alarms blaring and Amata, the overseas daughter and our childhood friend, frantically telling us that our father James is gone. He left, but supposedly no one ever enters or leaves the vault. You're born into it, and you die in it. The outside world is still too dangerous to even consider such a notion, or so we're told. The simple fact that someone left made the overseer incredibly mad. Now the guards are looking for us, and they're really aggressive.
Don't you see? We're getting out of here, just like the doctor. I'm not gonna let anyone stop us. It's me!
Tom! Be careful! Tom! No!
The Vault Authority have been challenged, and we're the only culprit by proxy. All that's left to do is reach the secret overseer tunnel to the Vault exit, following our father's footsteps. Amata tries to give us a pistol to fend for ourselves, and here the game gives us our first choice. We can leave the gun with Amata, saying that she needs it more than us, and later watch her stand up to their father and his violent guards all by herself.
Don't make me take that gun away from you, girlie. Just hand it over, nice and easy now.
No! Get away from me!
Oh my god, Amata! What have you done?
If we take the gun, we have to help her later against an aggressive interrogation, since she'll be defenseless. It doesn't change the quest's outcome, but it's one of those immersive sim elements that, not always but sometimes, Fallout 3 likes to treat us to. I'm not used to Bethesda RPGs showing a lot of reactivity to our actions, so I'm positively surprised when I see some. During the rest of our escape from the vault, we can also choose to help the local bully, Butch. He's the same guy who, as kids, tried to rob us of our gifted sweet roll during our own birthday. We can save his alcohol-addicted mother from an invasion of rad roaches, or convince him to stand firm and do it himself. It won't change the overall outcome of the quest, since Butch will be available as a companion much later, regardless of whether his mother is still alive, but it adds more flavor to your roleplay. Again, something that positively surprised me. We can kill the Overseer when we actually reach him, but Amata will be mighty angry at us if we do so. He's still her father after all. We can leave him be, he only spits threatening words but doesn't do much. Reaching his office and gathering info from his computer reveals that the no one enters or leaves the vault mantra is a lie. They had scouting parties who produced reports on the region immediately outside Vault 101, and kept it a secret from the general population. This won't be the last time we discover that the web of lies has been spun around the vaults. It's also where Bethesda's Fallouts start to diverge from the original canon. Tim Kaine mentioned in one of his YouTube videos that the vaults were conceived as prototypes for a generational spaceship, meant to be launched toward another star once the nuclear war had destroyed the Earth ecosystem. But in Fallout 3 and subsequent games, the developers chose to take them in a different direction entirely. They decided to take a way more sinister direction. The scene where we finally exit Vault 101 is astounding. Our character is blinded by the scorching light of the real sun, which they see for the first time in their life.
You actually opened it!
Let's stop and imagine that for a second. We spent the entire 19 years of our life underground, and the first time we see our star, it hurts us. It's the first explicit sign that this world is not for us anymore. We're delving into danger. The ruined capital wasteland presents itself, its landscape filled with derelict buildings recognizable from Washington, D.C., including the Washington Monument and the Capitol building. We can see what's left of them on the horizon, and we can actually reach them, though it won't be a great idea right now. From this moment, we're free to do as we please. The prologue lasted about 1 hour, which was an impressive amount of time for a tutorial back then. If we own the DLCs, they'll begin loading and we'll be notified. The suggested path is to go to Megaton, a nearby settlement, and start inquiring about our father. But true to the open-ended nature of Bethesda titles, quite a few of the initial main quest steps can be skipped, even by accident. For example, if we start doing the Wasteland Survival Guide quest chain for Moira in Megaton, an optional quest that introduces a lot of the game's mechanics, we're eventually directed to Rivet City. There, if we talk to everyone while exploring the settlement, we may find Dr. Lee and learn about her father directly, even before the story has pointed us her way, effectively skipping a significant chunk of the main quest. Anyway, following the intended path, in Megaton we discover through various means that our father indeed passed through the settlement, just as he did almost 20 years before when we were newborn. That's another telling revelation. We were not born in the vault, and somehow James gained residency for both of us. Once in the wasteland again, hungry for fresh information, he was directed to Galaxy News Radio, where a DJ called Three Dog reports on the state of the wasteland and urges listeners to fight the good fight. We can actually listen to the radio on our Pip-Boy. We dive through a few metro tunnels to reach the GNR building, where we meet a Brotherhood of Steel patrol and join them in fighting the super mutants infesting the capital downtown. The radio building is under siege, and a gigantic super mutant shows up. The game suggests using a Fat Man nuclear launcher taken from a fallen Brotherhood soldier to end it. This fight is optional, but I never miss the opportunity to side with Sarah Lyons and kill that giant thing. This sequence might not hold up as well with modern eyes, but I remember thinking in 2008 that it was awesome. I mean, look at the thing. It's holding a fire hydrant mounted on a giant pole as a beatstick. Inside the radio station, we may use our speech skill to convince Three Dog to tell us about our father, or be sent out to do a gigantic favor for him to boost the station signal. Depending on how much we've leveled up and equipped ourselves, this can be a tough mission involving a lot of super mutants. We have to retrieve the communication relay dish from the Virgo 2 lunar lander in the Museum of Technology, which is infested by green giants. The final sequence of entering the Washington Monument, secured and guarded by the Brotherhood, and installing the radio dish on top is iconic for me. You really feel the danger of a ruined city center, flooded by a swarm of huge, violent mutants, and the relief of finding a safe haven protected by heavily armed soldiers in power armor.
Hello.
After boosting the signal, a grateful Three Dog tells us our father has indeed been there, talking about a scientific pursuit called Project Purity, and that we need to speak with Dr. Lee in Rivet City.
When your dad passed through here, he and I talked for a good long time. He's a real stand-up kind of guy. He mentioned some scientific mumbo-jumbo, which didn't make sense to me, and mentioned something called Project Purity. He also said something about going to visit a Dr. Lee in Rivet City. Then he left in a hurry.
And this is where the main quest reconnects with the shortcut I mentioned earlier. Off we go to Rivet City, a settlement built inside a split aircraft carrier that was docked when the bombs fell. It's a majestic location, even if a little bothersome to navigate, and a clear throwback to the Fallout 2 tanker. Inside we find Dr. Madison Lee, who indeed met our father.
It's you. My heavens, you look so much like him. You're James's son, aren't you? What are you doing here? You were too young to remember, and I suppose James never spoke of me. Typical. I am Dr. Madison Lee. I worked with your parents many years ago. Now I run the science lab here in Rivet City. It was all I had left. When your mother died, your father decided to leave with you. He abandoned our work. We had no choice but to do the same. Your father insisted that we return to work on Project Purity. I tried telling him too much time has passed. There's no way it would work. Predictably, he refused to listen to me. He says he can prove it will work and headed off to the old lab. I'm sorry, I don't know what else to tell you. It's in the old Jefferson Memorial Building, northwest of here. Please, don't go after him. It was foolish of him to even think about going there alone.
She used to work with James on a project aimed at making the irradiated water of the Washington DC tidal basin clean again, an incredibly ambitious but noble undertaking. Our birth, the loss of our mother Catherine, relentless super mutant attacks, and the Brotherhood of Steel losing interest in a project that wasn't taking off, sent James into a crisis, and he abandoned it. He fled into a vault to keep his newborn safe, bargaining security in exchange for his scientific knowledge. I can't judge him for that. It's a reasonable human reaction. It makes the character feel believable. He passed through Rivet City after leaving Vault 101, spoke with Dr. Lee, and headed back to the Jefferson Memorial where Project Purity was based. The memorial is now crawling with super mutants, but our father's audio logs found there reveal that he never stopped working on Project Purity, even from inside the vault. One night, he broke into the overseer's office, hacked the computer, and discovered a reference to a Dr. Brown working on a Garden of Eden creation kit, or GEC, in Vault 112. That's another throwback to Fallout 2, where the GEC is the central artifact we need to find. Off to Vault 112 we go. It's brilliantly hidden under an inconspicuous garage, and the open-ended structure of the game means you can stumble upon it and skip most of the preceding main quest entirely if you explore far enough, since nothing in the world points you here. This vault hosts a virtual reality simulation hub created by Dr. Brown. Our father is inside one of the pods, but forcing him out might kill him. We need to enter a pod ourselves and join the simulation. It's a recreation of a suburban area where Dr. Brown acts as a bored evil tyrant in a little girl's disguise. He'll release our father if we carry out a series of diabolical tasks, like telling a child his parents are divorcing because of him, or breaking up a couple's marriage. Almost all the Vault residents don't know they're living in a simulation. To avoid being despicable, we can listen to the only resident who discovered the truth. She points us to a failsafe, an incredibly difficult puzzle involving objects that produce specific musical pitches when activated. The correct sequence is whistled by Betty, Dr. Brown's alter ego, while she plays in the park. It's brilliant but strangely convoluted for a game that rarely goes this deep, and nowhere else do we find puzzles this complex. Activating the hidden terminal and triggering the Chinese invasion program sends hostile commandos into the simulation, forcing it to end. All residents die except us, our father, and the little tyrant. The hilarious part is that this is the good ending. We gain karma by killing almost all the Vault residents through a simulated attack. If our AI overlords of the future ever trap me in a simulation, please don't do me any favors. Just leave me there. Once the pod opens, we're finally reunited with James, who tells us how things went. He had gone looking for Brown's research on the GEC, but ended up trapped in the simulation. He now wants to return to Rivet City and enlist Dr. Lee and their team to resume Project Purity. Assuming they're willing to listen after he ghosted them on the most important project ever conceived, but I guess we'll see.
The technology he developed is unstable, even dangerous, but it can be adapted for Project Purity. I need to return to Rivet City and talk with Madison. If we can find a GEC, we can make Project Purity work. Yes. With what I've learned, Madison is sure to see that we can finally succeed where we failed so many years ago. I'd like you to come with me. I'd like you to be there when we finally open the floodgates.
We can follow him to Rivet City or meet him there, where he convinces Dr. Lee to get back on board. He has a very high speech skill, what can I say?
I told you it would work, Madison, and now I can prove it.
James, you're back.
And with good news. I was right about Braun and the GEC. If we can find one, we can adapt it to work with the purifiers. How could it not be worth improving the lives of everyone in the wasteland? What could be a more worthy endeavor?
You haven't lost any of your passion, have you, James?
It's as important to me as ever, Madison. I know it's important to you too. Let's finish it together.
James, we don't have a GEC. I can get a small team together, but we'll need proof that it works before people believe us.
That's why we're going to head over there right now and get things up and running as best we can.
You know, if it were anyone else asking me to do this, I'd have them run right out of Rivet City.
And you know I wouldn't be here if I didn't think this would really work. It's time, Madison.
Damn you, James. When this is all over, you owe me a drink. I'll get the team together.
We all reconvene at the Jefferson Memorial, clear out any remaining super mutants, and begin maintenance work guided by James through the intercom. Our spirits are lifted, we're finally reunited with Dad and working on something meaningful together, right? Of course not. After activating the final valve, we helplessly witness the Enclave's arrival in force by Vertibird. Unless we've been completely ignoring the world around us, we've gathered some lore on this organization by now, from the iBots broadcasting across the wasteland or from old Nathan Vargas preaching in Megaton. They immediately occupy the memorial and we fight our way back to the control room, where the most dramatic confrontation unfolds before our eyes.
The facility is now under United States government control. The person in charge is to step forward immediately and turn over all materials related to this project.
That's quite impossible. This is a private project. The Enclave has no authority here. I'm going to have to ask you to leave at once.
Am I to assume, sir, that you are in charge?
Yes, I'm responsible for this project.
Then I repeat, sir, that you are hereby instructed to immediately hand over all materials related to the purifier.
I'm sorry, but that's...
Furthermore, you are to assist Enclave scientists in assuming control of the administration and operation of this facility at once.
Colonel. Is it, Colonel? I'm sorry, but the facility is not operational. It never has been. I'm afraid you're wasting your time here.
Sir, this is the last time I am going to repeat myself. Stand down at once and turn over control of this facility.
Colonel, I assure you that this facility will not function. We have never been able to successfully replicate test results.
I suggest you comply immediately, sir, in order to prevent any more incidents. Are we clear?
Yes, Colonel. Do whatever you want. There's no need for more violence.
Then you will immediately hand over all materials related to this project and aid us in making it operational at once.
Very well. Give me a few moments to bring the system online.
My patience wears thin.
Almost ready. I'm compiling the data now. Run. Run!
We've just been reunited and we've already lost him again, this time for good. The first time I played, I was genuinely shaken. After everything I'd done to find him, the story took him away, just like that. It was a pretty dramatic moment for those times. All we can do now is escort Dr. Lee and the science team to the Brotherhood of Steel headquarters, the only organization capable of protecting them from the Enclave's technological might. We fight through underground tunnels and eventually reach the Brotherhood's base in the Pentagon ruins. Elder Lyons welcomes the scientists and is briefed on the situation. May I just say that rushing to restart the most important project in the wasteland without any protection was perhaps not our father's finest hour? Anyway, what's done is done. With the scientists safe, we need to continue his work, or his sacrifice will have been in vain. Through the Brotherhood scribes, we access a Vault-Tec computer and locate a GEC still in stock in Vault 87. Scribe Rothschild explains that the vault's main entrance is heavily irradiated and unusable, so we have to approach through the Lamplight Caverns. In these caverns, we find the settlement of Little Lamplight, where a scrappy, self-sufficient group of kids fend for themselves. With a high enough speech skill, we can get immediate access, or earn their trust by freeing some of their people kidnapped by slavers. If you're playing a good character, I strongly suggest heading to Paradise Falls to free the kids and wipe every slaver off the map for maximum satisfaction. The kids are pretty annoying though, and very committed to exiling their own the moment they come of age.
Sorry.
There's nothing happy about it. This is the worst day of my life.
It's time to go.
You know the rules.
The rules are stupid.
You're a Mungo now. You gotta leave.
Maybe I can stay just a little longer?
Bye, Sticky.
Yeah. Bye, Sticky.
Eventually, they led us through Vault 87, which they guard closely because the place is full of super mutants and centaurs. The kids hold their ground thanks to the natural defensive advantage of the caverns, and some lore suggests the super mutants largely ignore them since they make poor subjects for FIV-induced reproduction. Inside the vault, we find a trapped, intelligent super mutant named Fox, locked in a room, and discover that the GEC is located in an insanely irradiated section of the complex. We can retrieve it ourselves with a radiation suit and enough chems, or free Fox and let him do it. Being a super mutant, radiation doesn't bother him, and since he's not hostile, we can choose to trust him. He actually delivers. As we reach the vault exit, the Enclave ambushes us, flashbangs us, and takes us prisoner. This is where the suspension of disbelief starts crumbling a little for me. By this point, we've defeated dozens of Enclave soldiers, and are almost certainly more powerful than the squad that takes us down. The mechanics pull in one direction, the narrative pulls in another. We wake up in a high-tech military cell. Colonel Autumn interrogates us for the Purifier's activation code, which our father shared with us before, our mother's favorite passage from the Book of Revelation. If we give him the correct one, he thanks us by executing our character. Game over. Any other response gets him angry, but before he can do anything about it, President Eden calls us to his office personally. By now, we know the Enclave claims to be the true remnant of the US government, and anyone who played Fallout 2 already knows they are very bad news. We're free to wander the base for a while. Colonel Autumn eventually countermands the President's orders, and the entire complex turns hostile. We fight our way through, and when we finally reach the President's room, we discover he is an artificial intelligence. He then lays out its plan: use a modified FEV strain through the Purifier to wipe the wasteland of all mutants and irradiated people, and he wants us to be his agent. It would be genocide, since most of the wasteland population carries generations of radiation exposure, even if they don't look like mutants. And this is a path our character can actually pursue, leading to the evil ending. We also learn that Autumn rebelled because he believed there had to be a less extreme way to fulfill the Enclave's goals. Let's not be fooled here. He's the guy who killed the scientist to curse our father, and who shoots us if we give him the Purifier code. There is no lesser evil when we're talking about the Enclave. From here we have options. Live with the FEV canister and make our choice later, or destroy Ravenrock entirely by using Autumn's self-destruction authorization code we've previously found in his bedroom. With enough speech or science, we can also turn Eden's logic against it and convince it to destroy itself along with the base. This is a clear nod to the first Fallout, when you can similarly convince the Master that his plan is flawed and watch him self-destruct. I'll take issue with something here. This moment doesn't quite land the way the original did. In the first game, convincing the Master required you to have actually explored the world, learned about the super mutant physiology, and gathered the right knowledge. The payoff was earned. Here, it simply comes down to a skill value. One approach rewards curiosity and engagement, while the other just rewards the number on the character sheet. It's a meaningful distinction. Anyway, we leave the base, running if it's all about to blow, and see a few vertebrates departing in a hurry. Outside, we can meet Fox again if we freed him from Vault 87, and if we have good karma, he can join us as a companion. Then we're back at the Brotherhood Citadel for a war briefing. The Brotherhood is brought up to speed on the Enclave threat, and finally moves to act.
If the Enclave has the Gek, there's nothing stopping them from starting the Purifier. They'll figure out the code eventually.
I'm afraid you're right. We need to act now while we can.
Send the Pride in. We can do it. We can win this.
All right, Sarah. The Pride goes in. But I want them to have some extra firepower. Rothschild, is it ready?
What? No, I mean, Lee and I have solved the power problems, but we've only barely finished diagnostic tests.
So?
It's not ready for field tests, let alone live fire situations. The weapons haven't been calibrated, the navigation detection system is offline.
Rothschild, enough. Can you make it work?
Honestly, I don't know. I think we can scrape by, and I suppose if we can't, it won't matter in the long run anyway.
Then it's decided. Sarah, you take the Pride and use the robot as support. Take our friend here and secure that Purifier.
Yes, sir. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that my father and I have been talking. The Pride and I have decided that after all you've survived, you've done enough to be an honorary member of Lion's Pride. So congratulations. Membership comes with some privileges, including our power armor.
Now, in my opinion, this is all incredibly epic and fantastic if we're playing a good character. I love the Brotherhood of Steel, and in this game they're the Knights in Shining Armor opposing the Black Knights. It doesn't make much sense though if you're playing an evil character. The game enrolls you in the Lion's Pride regardless, even if you're the worst person in the Wasteland. I understand that joining the Enclave isn't an option lore-wise, since you're either born into it or you're the enemy, but an alternative endgame path for evil characters should have been designed. Something more than just sneaking into Project Purity under false pretense and releasing the modified FEV on the population. Back to our story, the Brotherhood activates the semi-functional Liberty Prime for the assault. It's the giant robot that we're building at the Citadel, a remnant of the pre-war world. This walking weapon bellows hilarious propaganda about the US and democracy while annihilating everything in its path.
Democracy is non-negotiable.
Even in the epic endgame, Fallout 3 can resist wearing a satirical mask. We attack the occupied Jefferson Memorial, and Liberty Prime carves through the Enclave army like a hot knife through butter. Our character and Sarah Lyons dash inside, fight off the remaining resistance, and are informed by Dr. Lee that the Purifier has been damaged. Someone has to activate it through the heavily irradiated control room, or it will overload and be lost. In the base game, the choice falls to us or Sarah Lyons. This was the original ending, and it sparked real debate at the time. If we have a radiation-resistant companion, and there are 3, Fox, Sharon, or Sergeant Herald 3, they refused to do it in the base game. The Broken Sea DLC retconned this, letting us survive and, more importantly, letting one of those companions do it for us. You're immune to radiation, I'm not. Do me a solid and step into that room for a few seconds. In the original game, the answer was always no. It doesn't make any sense, it felt railroaded, and I still don't know how it seemed like a good idea in the design phase. I was genuinely relieved when Broken Steel fixed it. The ending slides roll with Ron Perlman recounting some of our feats, another nod to the previous games.
The Capital Wasteland proved a cruel, inhospitable place. But the lone wanderer refused to surrender to the vices that had claimed so many others. The values passed on from father to child: selflessness, compassion, honor, guided this noble soul through countless trials and triumphs.
In my last playthrough, my good character Alex, my canonical Fallout character for the channel footage, sacrificed himself to save the wasteland and was remembered as a hero. For a little while anyway, since I had Broken Steel installed, and after a few days Alex wakes up in the Citadel Infirmary right next to Sarah Lyons. But that's a story for later. I decided to walk through Fallout 3's main story in this much detail because I like it. It's not perfect, it has weird moments, forced ones, and some that don't hold up if you take a moment to think about them. But I love its high stakes, its epic clash between the forces of good and evil, and the way it quietly suggests that science and military strength, when guided by good people, can change the fate of the world for the better. I hope you're still with me, because now we move into a much more personal part of this video. Including secondary quests, Fallout 3 provides 59 quests to complete, and that number rises to 94 with all the DLCs. For both our sakes, I won't recount all of them, but instead I want to talk about the ones I liked the most, whether for a heck yeah moment or because they struck the right chord in me. The first of my favorite quests is Riley's Rangers. I guess you weren't expecting it. It can be started in numerous ways, like many quests in this game, but you'll mostly likely meet an unconscious Riley in the chop shop, the underworld infirmary, or catch their SOS radio transmission.
This is Butcher of Riley's Rangers. If anyone can hear this signal, we're in danger and we need your help. We're trapped on the roof of the Statesman Hotel by a large contingent of super mutants. We are low on ammo and running out of time. If assistance is not possible, please attempt to contact Riley, who's made for Underworld inside the Museum of History. Keep your eyes open. We've left booby traps and mines to help slow the mutants down.
After waking her up, she recounts how her high-profile mercenary group got stuck on the roof of a building while besieged by super mutants. She got wounded trying to exfiltrate and get help for her rangers. In this quest, we get to kill a lot of super mutants, go through a destroyed hospital to gain access to an abandoned hotel through a toppled crane, and reach a bunch of tough-as-nails trained rangers. The path is full of traps set by the rangers to thin the super mutant horde, which you have to deactivate while trying to reach them. We also find the body of one of the rangers who fell during the retreat. In a brilliant tactical decision, he was the one carrying all the ammo, and he's the dead one, just like Private Frost in Aliens. We can collect this package and deliver the ammo to the squad as soon as we meet them. We find them on the hotel roof, help them against the last enemy wave, and escort them out to safety. The Ranger AI makes them suicidal against the super mutants, so getting them all out alive is an accomplishment in itself. As a reward, we get to join the squad, receiving a sweet combat armor and a named minigun, and Riley gives us a secondary task that pays us for every discovered location in the game map. I love this quest because it leans into a military sci-fi kind of narrative, which I enjoy very much. Another favorite of mine is Oasis, which technically is a location more than a quest itself. It's not easy to find. Normally you have to explore thoroughly or stumble across one of their wandering NPCs. This is a place where nature still blooms with bushes and tall trees, contrary to the rest of the wasteland, where everything is pretty much barren. Here resides a sort of sci-fi druidic commune that venerates a talking tree like a god. If we take part in a weird ritual, we're allowed to meet this god, which is none other than Harold, the beloved ghoul NPC from the first 2 games. The branch that once grew from his head has become a fully grown tree. Harold is melted into it, his internal organs spread all over its roots and branches, but his ghoulish nature forbids him to die. He's understandably pretty angry about the whole situation, and he's had enough of the residents treating him like a deity. He just wants to die, and asks us to destroy his heart. which is now nestled among the roots in the caves below. Different Oasis NPCs have different opinions on what we should do. One wants Herald's boon of fertility spread across the whole wasteland. Another wants to stop the growth and keep the grove a secret. In this playthrough, I chose to expand the growth, since it could be the only way to restore life to the entire wasteland. The Spock moment. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. I'm sorry, Herald.
So, it looks like you decided to do things their way, huh? How come? So, they really need me that badly, huh? Yeah, I guess I never thought of it that way. Awfully selfish of me. Should we give them another chance? Herbert? Fine. I mean, Bob. I still think it's funny when I call him Herbert.
Agatha's song is another quest worth mentioning, though for different reasons. Agatha is an elderly woman living in a secluded shack among the rocks, broadcasting her violin playing over her late husband's radio equipment. How she survives out there makes absolutely no sense. She should have been killed by raiders for kicks years ago, but they always take the bait and help her. She wants us to recover a Stradivarius from Vault 92, a place where the nation's best musicians were kept safe when the bombs fell. What sounds like a simple fetch quest turns into something darker. The vault has been breached by mirelurks and dangerous wildlife, and exploring it reveals a grim story. Vault 92 was designed to experiment with white noise, implanting subliminal messages into its residents until they went insane and tore each other apart, limb from limb. An Event Horizon moment if I ever saw one. A nice Easter egg is that the vault's overseer is named Richard Rubin, a clear nod to the famous music producer Rick Rubin. I appreciate these little details plugged into games. They reward the attentive player with something extra. I also liked how early the game throws you into a human story, having a kid, Brian Wilkes, ask for your help almost as soon as you step outside the vault. The settlement he lives in has been overrun by giant mutated ants, and you'll help him if you're not a monster. It's a sad tale involving a reckless scientist and the community being wiped out. You can even find the kid a new home later, which is a nice touch. But not all quests have a good ending, and Tenpenny Tower is the best example of that. A group of sentient ghouls want to access the tower, but the owner, Alistair Tenpenny, won't allow it. You're pulled into the middle, eliminate the ghouls, or find a way to let them in. The tower residents are obnoxious enough that you might feel inclined to side with the ghouls. The problem is that the same ghouls, while not hostile to you, want you to open a hidden passage so they can sneak in, kill everyone inside with the help of their feral brethren, and take the place for themselves. So the residents weren't entirely wrong to distrust them.
I already got a plan. They think I'm a monster? I'll show them the real monsters. We'll unleash our feral brethren on them. All those bigoted sons of bitches will get torn apart. Trouble is getting past the damn subway access door.
There is no good ending here, and sometimes, if you're playing a good character, the best move is to simply walk away. But Fallout 3 doesn't lack more places to explore, items to find, and lore to gather. Let's have a look at what is the game's biggest feature, its exploration. In all the contemporary reviews I've read from 2008 about Fallout 3, and there were a lot of them, one praise was constant: how Bethesda's take on the Fallout franchise made exploring the wasteland an incredible experience. Besides this particular game, I think the same can be said for most of this company's titles. They absolutely nailed the exploration aspect. Well, maybe with the exception of Starfield, but I still have to play it and it's mostly hearsay on my part, so it doesn't count for much. I'm looking forward to the experience. In Fallout 3, as soon as we leave Vault 101 and are blinded by the scorching sun, we are free to do as we please. We have a suggested path to follow, reaching the nearby town of Megaton and asking around about our father. But it's just that, a suggestion. We're not forced to follow it. Most of us probably stumble upon Springvale Elementary School or the Super Duper Mart on our way to Megaton, and have our first real fight with the raiders who occupy those places. But if you're the brave or stupid type, you can head straight for the Washington Monument in the distance, diving into metro tunnels and probably getting killed by super mutants in downtown DC, who you're nowhere near equipped to face yet. Still, it's a choice you can make, and even if I usually end up following the suggested path myself, I like having the options on the table. Having played all Elder Scrolls and Fallout RPGs, even if I haven't covered all of them on the channel yet, I can testify that this has always been Bethesda's design signature from Arena onward. They're mostly sandboxes, not necessarily story-driven games. You can treat them like a simulation and live your life in the capital wasteland if you desire. But that's not how I like to play my games. I prefer them to have a clear beginning and an end, but I understand the appeal. Daggerfall in particular is an incredible fantasy life simulator, if a bit tedious in the long run. Skyrim restartitis is a real thing. So many players started the game with a character, only to restart a few hours later with a different one. A very small percentage of players actually finish the game. This is part of the fun of Bethesda's games, and Fallout 3 is no different. You can be granted a house in Megaton, or receive a luxury apartment with a view in Tenpenny Tower if you blow up the former. You can decorate it, not only arranging individual objects where you like, with some difficulty, but also purchasing interior themes. I'm admittedly bad at this. I'm more of a practical guy than an interior designer, so I don't indulge too much in these aspects, but it's still an option players may have fun with. You can do good deeds and become the wasteland savior, or transform into a truly despicable being and have people fear you. Lawkeepers or mercenaries will show up accordingly with a bounty on your head. You can also try to walk the thin line between good and evil and maintain a neutral path through the whole game, which in my opinion is mighty difficult to do if you don't cheese the system. You'll gain or lose karma depending on your actions, in a big throwback to the original games, but it's also a system that's really easy to exploit. For example, you can gain infinite positive karma by giving purified water to beggars outside Megaton or Rivet City, or tank it just as easily by stealing the most trivial items. It's a rough mechanic, but functional for measuring the impact of your actions. At high karma, citizens will give you supplies out of gratitude. At low karma, slavers will do the same out of fear. You can go murdering entire settlements just because, fully knowing that in doing so you might lose a lot of content, except for the children for obvious rating reasons. Or, as I like to call it, go murder hoboing for good, like when I freed the kids from the slavers and erased the entire population of Paradise Falls for the greater good of the wasteland. The slavers' head honcho has two lovers called Crimson and Clover. Really? Game, stop throwing Easter eggs at me. Wandering the wasteland is a dangerous endeavor though. Some modern players find this world a little empty, but I beg to differ. It's true that nowadays we're used to open world titles, throwing all kinds of activities at us, some better than others, to occupy our time. But Fallout 3 has an old school charm in the way it populates a world that, by definition, is mostly devoid of life. The devs even had to enlarge the map by 20%, fearing the game would feel too small compared to Oblivion due to its lack of vegetation. The 2006 Elder Scrolls title filled a lot of Cyrodiil with trees and bushes, making the world feel visually dense, but that couldn't be done here. It wouldn't make sense in a world that's barren by definition. Walking a full minute without finding anything to do makes perfect sense in a nuclear wasteland, but you'll find things to do if you pay attention. I never felt bored or had the impression the game was undercooked. Outside of town, I've always found some dangerous critters trying to end me, or some raiders, or a malfunctioning pre-war robot. And sometimes you're just walking your merry way to a destination when you hear shots and explosions in the distance. You investigate and find caravans fending off raiders or different types of creatures going at each other. In this playthrough, I actually attached myself to a caravan going through the DC ruins to Rivet City, safety in numbers and all that. It made sense and it was immersive. Out in the wasteland, you can also encounter said merchant caravans traveling the more well-traveled routes, complete with bodyguards, selling and repairing equipment if you stop to trade. They add to the immersion and recall the big caravan routes of the second game, even if they become less useful the further into the game you get. You can also invest in them in Canterbury Commons, increasing their inventory, their repair skill, and the caps they have available for trading. Fallout 3 uses caps, mainly Nuka-Cola ones, as currency, in a very similar way to the first game. In the second one, they were made obsolete by the New California Republic going back to paper money and metal coins. But here we are far from the NCR. You can find said caravans under attack and choose whether to lend a hand or not, or even help ourselves to their belongings later if they fall in battle. Certain interesting locations with loot and lore are found simply by wandering, with no quests, marked locations, or particular clues pointing at them. Environmental storytelling is king here, and I've lost count of how many weird or sad situations I've stumbled across. A couple of skeletons still holding hands, having chosen to spend their last moments together, or skeletons surrounded by booze and drugs, going out with a bang. I'm still asking myself why there is a frigging prison in a school. I doubt it was installed after the war, or I chuckled every time I found a switchblade knife or brass knuckles inside the school desk. Nice kids they had, dear. While the city outskirts are vast and barren, with the occasional gas station, factory, or destroyed overpass, the city center is absurdly dangerous for characters fresh out of the vault. The game makes clear multiple times that it's a war zone, invaded by super mutants, and it even tells you why if you pay attention during the main quest. Since they're sterile, they ran out of the green stuff to create more of themselves through FEV experimentation in Vault 87. So they stormed out searching and became an incredible plague unleashed on the city ruins. That's why they kidnap people, besides eating them. But that's just what happens above ground, because the city metro system plays a fundamental role in world building. Since the game engine of the time, Gamebryo, couldn't load a substantial portion of the map all at once, the developers divided it into zones connected by metro tunnels. Gamebryo was also used for Morrowind and Oblivion, and would later serve as the foundation for Bethesda's creation engine. These metro tunnels and stations are not just interactive loading screens, but complete dungeons that hide dangers, treasures, and quests. They still fill me with unease every time I traverse them. Some are bigger than others and some are confusing, but they become an integral part of the experience. You find people hidden in them, scientists running experiments, even an entire settlement of weirdos who believe themselves to be vampires. They're also home to one of the most disturbing quests in the game, involving a family in Arefu who stopped responding to their daughter's letters. And of course, the dangers of raiders, critters, or super mutants occupying those tunnels never cease. You use them quite a bit during the main story too, to reach the Brotherhood of Steel or escape the Enclave. I remember the first time I played Fallout 3 in 2008, following the main quest a bit too eagerly and finding myself underleveled and under-equipped for the dangers ahead. Suddenly seeing the Brotherhood logo spray-painted in those tunnels, showing the way, gave a huge sense of relief. A shelter was nearby, finally. Another great thing about exploration is that it's always rewarded. There are plenty of safes to lockpick, computers to hack into, secret caches with caps, ammunition and weapons. I have to say that I quite dislike the lockpicking minigame though, something I've been enduring across numerous RPGs over the decades to my chagrin. NPCs react when you look at locked containers, which is a nice touch. What matters the most to me though is the constant presence of books and magazines that permanently increase your skills. There are a lot of them, and if you're thorough enough, you can raise nearly all of your skills to the cap. There is nothing more disappointing in an RPG than discovering a location by yourself and finding it empty. In Fallout 3, that almost never happens. You're encouraged to explore and rewarded for doing so. The reward isn't always spectacular. You may find a hidden spot containing a cache of 2 frag grenades and 20mm bullets when you're wielding a Gatling laser, and that would be a minor letdown. But I'd rather find a location that would have been useful early in the game than have an RPG scale everything to my level. There is a sweet spot between finding so little as in Morrowind that you stop bothering to open chests, and suddenly finding a filthy raider packing a laser rifle with matching power cells. Fallout 3 mostly finds that balance, leaving you with enough satisfaction to keep going. Maybe you don't need that gun ammo, but here's a magazine to permanently boost one of your skills. That's good design. The Wasteland is also full of interesting people, often NPCs with no quest marker attached that you have to find by yourself. There is Gary, who appears in several unsettling iterations. There is the lady in Arefu who couldn't bear it anymore and locked herself into a fantasy where the Great War never happened.
Hello? Is this the mailman? Oh, I do hope my fall catalog has arrived. Good to see you. You must be exhausted from all that walking in this horrible heat. Oh, and hungry too. Sit, please. Braley Ewers is the name. Don't mind my husband, Kenneth. He woke up on the wrong side of the bed this morning. Oh my, I don't know. Mrs. West is probably whipping up a batch of her famous cookies, and all the kids are playing in the yards. It's so nice outside. The grass looks lovely this time of year.
There is the Nuka-Cola lady, who compulsively collects it and has built an entire museum dedicated to her obsession. How she survived the raiders is beyond me. It quickly turns sad when you realize the only other inhabitant of her micro-settlement is a man who's kind to her purely because he wants to sleep with her, and she's completely oblivious.
I take it you're here to check out my Nuka-Cola collection and take the tour. I have one of the best Nuka-Cola collection in the capital wasteland. Heck, I've won the Nuka-Cola Fan Club Collection Award for the last 10 years in a row. Yep, I'm the president, the recording secretary, and the treasurer.
There are plenty of uncomfortable situations out there, but few match the Republic of Dave, where a man created a cult around himself, taking multiple wives and raising children to help run the place, all while declaring his farm an independent sovereign state. He allows elections though, so he's technically not a tyrant. In this 5-shack farm, there is an immigration bureau, a tourism office, and the Bureau of Dave-like activities. The power dynamic is deeply unsettling, and you can rig the election for the next president, whose only candidate is Dave himself. I don't know if it's pure satire or something with a darker point to make, but that place certainly stands out. You can also find the ruins of Bethesda's own office in DC, which is a bit meta and another fun Easter egg, or dead Chinese spies in an isolated broadcast tower. Fallout 3's world rewards the curious player, and after 115 hours in it, I still found new things to stumble across. That says a lot about what Bethesda built here. Bethesda games normally include a lot of combat, and Fallout 3 is no different, but this was the first of their modern RPGs to include firearms. In later interviews, the developers say they took Oblivion's archery system and worked on it to include firearms. So in a way, Fallout 3 really is Oblivion with guns, as its detractors often describe it. The devs also admitted they had limited experience with shooter mechanics, having never developed one. Strictly speaking, this isn't entirely accurate, since Bethesda developed 3 Terminator games in the early 90s with significant shooter elements, though the technology had changed so dramatically by then that the experience might not have translated. The result is that Fallout 3 plays like a poor first-person shooter, let's face it. I'm not good at FPS games, not even close, but even I noticed as much. Aiming is imprecise, weapons often miss when they should hit, and shots connect when you're clearly off target. Don't get me wrong, the system is functional and you can get a good amount of fun out of it, but it lacks the precision the genre typically demands. The stroke of genius was the introduction of VETS, the Vol-Tech-assisted targeting system, with some interviews crediting the idea to Todd Howard himself, who served as game director and executive producer, though I suspect the reality was more of a group effort than those articles suggest. VETS is a reimagining of the original game's cold shot system. Your character has a certain amount of action points, depending on your agility score and some perks, and these are spent inside VETS to shoot, reload, and walk your enemies in melee. They regenerate over time once you exit VETS. Some attacks cost more than others depending on the weapon. A kill cam follows your best shots from a third-person view, which is cool, though sometimes it's bugged and shows the wrong part of the scene or clips into a wall. Most reviews of the time agree with my impression. The shooter mechanics were relatively poor, but VETS was great fun. You can aim at specific body parts, again like in the isometric games, to achieve different effects. You can break a weapon in your enemy's hands, cripple an arm so they drop it, maim their legs to slow them down, or just blow their head clean off. The percentage of hitting a specific body part depends on distance, your relevant weapon skill, and any applicable perks. And just like in the original games, where shooting enemies in the eyes was the best course of action, in practice you just want to go for headshots, since the damage output is higher, and having a head explode is a considerably more efficient stopping move than slowing or disarming them. Also, pardon me for saying it, but this game is so long if you go for a completionist approach, that you'll get tired of constantly activating VETS, aiming for the head, and watching the same limited set of kill cams over and over again. Outside of your character skills, equipment obviously plays an important role in how you perform in combat. Weapons are divided into categories tied to the relevant skill: small guns, big guns, energy weapons, explosives, melee weapons, and unarmed. They make a lot of different character builds possible. You can be deadly with any of them, but keep in mind that the experience of blowing a raider's head off with a 10mm pistol versus a 44 Magnum is vastly different. They're both small guns weapons, but at very different points on the power scale. Ammo doesn't have weight, so hoarding a ton of it is a viable strategy, unlike in New Vegas, which introduced the hardcore mode where ammo has weight. The game doesn't explain this nearly well enough, but marking items as favorites and assigning them a number for quick combat switching or healing is really important and worth doing early. Armors follow similar logic but don't have skills attached to them. The only exception is power armor, which requires a dedicated perk. The Brotherhood of Steel will grant it to you by getting friendly with them, allowing your character to wear advanced Brotherhood or Enclave armors.
Listen up, you goddamn puke! You are now wearing prototype medic power armor. You take care of me, and I'll take take care of you.
That being said, nothing stops you from finishing the game in the Naughty Nightwear. Could make for a nice challenge run.
I'm only gonna ask you this one time. Give me the Naughty Nightwear.
Weapons and armor degrade with use, making the repair skill pretty much essential. It lets you combine two identical items into one in superior condition, simulating your character cannibalizing one for parts. You can pay caps to have shopkeepers or wandering merchants repair items for you without providing a second item for parts, but their skill scores are usually low enough that it's rarely worth it. As a personal note, heavy weapons like miniguns, flamers, or Gatling lasers never felt worth the effort to me. They're fun to use, don't get me wrong, but they chew through ammo at an alarming rate, degrade quickly, and are annoyingly hard to find a replacement for when you need to repair them. They also don't seem to deal significantly more damage than rifles, which makes the trade-off hard to justify. The custom weapons are a different story and a fun one. Fallout 3 lets you craft a small selection of improvised weapons from junk found across the wasteland, provided you buy or find their blueprints, and they range from genuinely useful to completely unhinged. Just as an example, there's the rocket launcher, which fires any junk item you're carrying as a projectile, as Moira is eager to explain. Tin cans, teddy bears, you name it.
This baby shoots all the junk you might find out there in the wasteland. Ashtrays, teddy bears, you name it.
It's more of a silly flavor weapon than a practical one, since hauling around the launcher and all that junk is impractical, but it perfectly captures the spirit of the game. Scrappy, creative, and extremely exaggerated. Combat itself can be very graphic, with limbs detaching, heads exploding, and people turned to ash. It's certainly as violent as the first games. It feels very gory at first, but given the sheer volume of combat you face, you eventually get desensitized and stop noticing it altogether. Overall, combat is functional and can be quite fun, especially with Veth giving the system a strategic layer that also serves as a nod to the original games. But it's surely not the game's strongest asset. Who you're fighting matters as much as how you're fighting though. The Capital Wasteland is home to a number of distinct factions, and understanding them is a big part of understanding the setting. Let's have a look at who's out there. Fallout 3 includes a lot of factions, as you might expect, but not all of them are immediately relevant or interactable in a meaningful way. Some exist purely to help the game engine manage individual NPCs. The Super Mutants, for example, are technically listed as their own faction, but you can't interact with them in any meaningful way except through combat. With the notable exceptions of the Companion Fox and the random encounter with Uncle Leo, they're nothing more than monsters to destroy. You can't negotiate with them, befriend them, or infiltrate their ranks. They're a plain and simple menace. Similarly, the Raiders are everywhere in the Capital Wasteland, but function in much the same way. They're not a unified faction with any real internal structure, just scattered groups of hostile humans who attack on sight. Except for the Pit Raiders from the Pit DLC, Fallout 3 doesn't have defined gangs like the Khans or the Vipers. You can't do much of anything with them beyond clearing them out of wherever they're settled. In that sense, they sit closer to the Super Mutants than to any of the more nuanced factions the game offers. Then there are what I like to call the technical factions, settlement groups who are used by the game to track how NPCs respond to you. The Megaton residents, the Little Lamplight kids, the RFO community, and so on. Some settlements are even divided into subgroups, like Rivet City with its separate factions for the Council, the Guards, and the general residents. Depending on the location, you can join them through a quest chain, tests, or rites of passage, or simply do favors for them and be liked in return. In a casual playthrough, you may not even notice some of them. You may notice Megaton residents giving you gifts every now and then, but that's more related to your karma than anything else. Speaking of karma, two factions that I briefly mentioned before exist specifically to hunt you depending on your moral alignment, the Talon Company and the Regulators. They appear as random encounters, attacking your character and carrying a contract with the bounty on your head. If you take the Lawbringer perk, you can join the Regulators and be paid for any evil character's finger you bring to them, a special item that begins appearing on their bodies once you join. The Contract Killer perk works in the opposite direction, giving you years from good characters to deliver to a contact based at the scrapyard. Other minor factions worth noting for their player interactions are the Abolitionists and the Railroad. The Abolitionists help escaped slaves, and you can actively assist them by helping relocate their base to the symbolically fitting Lincoln Memorial. The Railroad will have a much bigger role in Fallout 4, but they appear here in a minor capacity. A chain of clues scattered across the Capital Wasteland may lead you to identify a synth in Rivet City, who has no idea what they are, their memory having been wiped. You can decide to side with the Institute and deliver them to the Commonwealth, keep their identity a secret, or help the synth escape. The Slavers are another major faction, settled in Paradise Falls. An evil character can join them, buy a slave as a bodyguard, Clover from the Crimson and Clover duo, and capture and sell people into slavery. But the two real major factions in the capital wasteland are, clearly, the Brotherhood of Steel and the Enclave. The Brotherhood is divided. The main chapter operates under Elder Lion's guidance and is heavily involved in the main quest, while the Outcasts, who reject Lion's approach of helping the local population rather than hoarding technology, have a more prominent role in the Operation Anchorage DLC. The Enclave is the game's main antagonist, the Black Knights we have to defeat in my earlier comparison. And just as in Fallout 2, it's a faction you can't join. I've seen players complain about this over the years, but there is a specific lore reason for it. You're born into the Enclave, you don't join them. They're the remnants of pre-war US deep state elements who consider themselves the direct continuation of the rightful government that survived the Great War. They regard anyone outside their ranks as a genetic non-compliance offender, and are plotting to wipe them all out. I suppose this rule is somewhat elastic when it comes to scientists, since we find Anna Holt, one of Dr. Lee's staffers, captured and working for them in Raven Rock. Many players since Fallout 2 have criticized the Enclave as a generic, all-out evil faction with no nuance. But in my opinion, sometimes you're just tired of shades of grey and want something unapologetically evil to destroy in your RPGs. Overall, most of these factions are fairly transparent to the player, existing to help the game manage the world around you rather than to offer meaningful choices. There is no real faction to actively pursue through roleplay. You join the Brotherhood, you fight the Enclave. That's pretty much it, until the very end when you can throw a curveball at Project Purity and go along with President Eden's plan. The Brotherhood of Steel is still my favorite faction by far, and since this was my first Fallout game, it shaped how I still perceive them. Today I'm well aware that Elder Lions was probably an exception and not the rule, as they've been portrayed as heartless bastards in both Fallout 4 and the TV series. I find that genuinely disappointing, because the Brotherhood has been an inspiring faction since the original isometric game. In my mind, I always wanted to be part of them, to have access to their superior technology and stand against the forces of evil. But I'm just an old role player who still likes good versus evil epic tales. It's something I feel developers are less willing to embrace these days, and I find that really disappointing. Speaking of another game aspect that's not terribly deep, Fallout 3 presents 8 permanent companions the player character can recruit, often depending on their karma score. It's not a surprise that everyone's favorite companion is always Dogmeat, a staunch evergreen from the first Fallout. Don't get me wrong, I'm as fond of dogs as the next person, but that can be a little limited if we consider companion characterization. That is, the fan favorite speaks volumes on the quality of our other companions. We go from the very vanilla Star Paladin Cross from the Brotherhood of Steel, exactly what you expect from a by-the-book paladin, to the aforementioned Clover, following you only if you're evil, to the bully of your youth, Butch Deloria, who wants to upgrade the Tunnel Snakes to full raider status and somehow requires neutral karma to recruit. I don't know how helping a bully raise a raider gang is even remotely considered neutral. The neutral path is always the hardest to design for. That's why most games don't even bother. You can only take one human companion with you at any time, plus Dogmeat. They're generally well voiced, but lack personal quests and stories that would have greatly enhanced their characterization.
And so our deeds are carried on through our sons and our daughters. Continue to remember him fondly. Continue to tell his story. And continue to do his work. Through you, he shall carry on.
And, as with all Bethesda companions throughout history, they always get in the way, blocking passages or behaving erratically. After a while, I usually prefer to go alone and be the real lone wanderer. The companion I personally like the most is Fox, not because he's particularly useful in combat, but because he helps in major story beats, feeling like an actual party member pulling his weight. And he weighs a lot.
It can't be. Either you are quite real, I am going quite mad. Could you actually be a pure human? No! Must you use that vulgar term? Yes, I was born in the FEV chambers, but a super mutant I certainly am not. I prefer the term metahuman. Suits me better, don't you think? Perhaps I'm getting ahead of myself. The name's Fox.
He also has a bunch of peculiarities. How many good super mutants do you encounter, who also retain their intellect after surviving the FEV treatment? There are also temporary companions that some quests give you. They share different scripting and behaviors from permanent companions, usually staying with the Lone Wanderer for the duration of a single quest. Since they're often part of escort missions, they don't heal automatically after battle the way normal companions do, so you need to keep a close eye on them. Their AI is often suicidal, having them attack enemies with no tactics or concern for their own safety. If they're meant to run and hide, they usually fail badly at it. The special mention goes to Sydney, who you meet during the Stealing Independence questline. She's a tough relic hunter and a clear Easter egg, a throwback to the TV series Relic Hunter from 1999, whose main character is named Sydney Fox and is portrayed by Tia Carrere. The NPC even kind of looks like her. It's a fun reference, but it also highlights something worth noting. Sydney has more characterization than most permanent companions, including a backstory you can ask her about once you become friends with her. And she's just a temporary addition. That says a lot. Overall, I don't think companions in Fallout 3 are anything to write home about. They lack deep characterization and personal quests that would have fleshed out their stories and behaviors. Folks aside, none of them leave a strong impression, which is a real missed opportunity. With the companions out of the way, literally, let's shift to something Fallout 3 handles considerably better, its visuals. The first thing that comes to mind when talking about Fallout 3's visuals is its bleakness. It's all shades of grey, brown and green, and there is a lot of green, not only in the Pip-Boy interface and HUD. This artistic choice has been criticized by many, who argue that it makes the game's visuals bland, samey, and generally uninteresting. I disagree. I think it's integral to making Fallout 3 unforgettable. The green isn't just a color choice. To me, it integrates perfectly with the concrete ruins of DC, the barren outskirts, the broken roads, and the underground tunnels we find when exploring. This green hue is so hated that a plethora of mods exist to scrub it away entirely. The debate has been fierce since the game came out, and it recently resurfaced due to speculation around the possible Fallout 3 remaster dropping in the future. Should an eventual remaster keep the green tint? I think it must. Not just because I like it, but because it's part of what the player base recognizes as Fallout 3. Show someone the most generic screenshot of the game, and they'll immediately distinguish it from New Vegas just by the color palette. It's also a deliberate artistic choice. It makes the entire game feel sickly, anchoring in the player's subconscious that the nuclear war didn't just destroy the world 2 centuries ago. It poisoned it, and the effects still linger. That the post-nuclear world is not okay, not even close. For the record, you are free to mod your games as you please, I'm not judging you for doing so. But to me, erasing the green from Fallout 3 completely erases its artistic vision, trivializing it. But the green is not the only thing that makes Fallout 3 special. How could you forget the landscapes, especially the one you get when you're flashbanged by the sun as you exit Vault 101, or the sweeping view from the Washington Monument? We do have to apply a bit of suspension of disbelief. Nuclear warheads would probably leave little more than craters. But this is a game, and we need ruins to explore and dungeons to delve into, rather than a flat, moon-like desolation. The developers went so far as to visit the White House to document it before virtually destroying it, which landed the person doing the scouting in some trouble with security, who weren't thrilled about someone suspiciously casing a potentially sensitive target. A funny anecdote and one worth remembering. That same attention to detail carries through into the world itself. Beyond the well-known environmental storytelling, there are smaller elements that reward close attention and deepen the immersion considerably. The little girl in Oasis uses entire pieces as flip-flop souls, because that's what they have on hand while scavenging. The bobbleheads gently swaying on the stand in your house. And then there is the first time you reach Megaton, greeted by a Protectron, as that massive gate of welded plain scraps slowly slides open, leading you into what passes for civilization out here. These are the kinds of details that make Bethesda worlds feel genuinely lived in, and Fallout 3 is full of them. All of that visual craft does a remarkable job of pulling you into the wasteland. But a world this desolate needs more than something to look at, it needs something to listen to. And sounds in Fallout 3 are just as important as its visuals. Starting with the voice acting, the game opens with Ron Perlman narrating the introduction, as it did in the first 2 isometric games.
Since the dawn of humankind, when our ancestors first discovered the killing power of rock and bone, blood has been spilled in the name of everything from God to justice to simple psychotic rage. In the year 2077, after millennia of armed conflict, the destructive nature of man could sustain itself no longer. The world was plunged into an abyss of nuclear fire and radiation. But it was not, as some had predicted, the end of the world. Instead, the apocalypse was simply the prologue to another bloody chapter of human history. For man had succeeded in destroying the world. But war never changes.
He also narrates the ending slides. It was an incredible throwback, a sign of continuity from Bethesda. They were clearly stating, yes, we're doing things our own way, but this is still Fallout.
Humanity, with all its flaws, was deemed worthy of preservation. The waters of life flowed at last, free and pure for any and all. The capital wasteland, at long last, was saved. So ends the story of the Lone Wanderer.
Liam Neeson voiced James, our character's father, giving him a slightly raspy but composed delivery, even in the most tense moments. He has a very peculiar tone that's immediately recognizable. It's a shame we spent so little time with him in the game's story. I would have loved more. Maybe his race had something to do with it, I don't know.
There you go. My goodness, just a year old and already walking like a pro. Your mother would have been so proud. Listen, kiddo, I know you don't like it when Daddy leaves you alone, but I need you to take care of yourself for a minute. You just stay here while Daddy runs to his office. You'll be okay, pal. I'll be back in a bit.
Moving away from celebrities, Fallout 3 has some lines delivered better than others, making the overall voice work you constantly hear from NPCs a little uneven in performance. A good example is Moira Brown, the quirk inventor in Megaton, impeccably portrayed by her voice actor, Karen Carbone.
Wow, what a great research assistant you are. I mean, really, that's dedication. Demonstrating how to withstand pain by getting injured? Wow. When you're ready, come back here with some serious injuries, maybe a crippled limb or two, and I'll take notes and fix you up. I'll be waiting here with plenty of bandages for you, so don't worry. Just go get horribly injured. Oh, and be careful.
She also voiced our character's mother, Sydney, and others.
Whew. Say, you're pretty decent in a firefight. Well, with what I do for a living, you need to be. Sorry, I'm being a complete asshole. I'm Sydney. It's good to meet a fellow relic hunter.
It's not unusual in huge open-world games to have an actor voice different characters, and it's a nice surprise when you recognize their different performances. On the contrary, kids' voices are usually exaggerated and unconvincing, and you get an overdose of it when the main story pushes you through little lamplight. They're quite annoying.
Oh, hey, excuse me, hey! Hey there. You have any Nuka-Cola? Even just a bit? Can I have some? Be your best friend. Honest, totally, not even kidding. Yeah, I got lots to trade. But you got no Nuka? You're not getting nothing. No way.
What the hell is RJ thinking, letting a damn Mungo like you in here? So who are you working with? Raiders? Slavers? Mutants? Answer up, Mungo! Oh, you think Sammy and the rest wouldn't have gotten back on their own eventually? I taught them better than that. Well, if you're sticking around, you ought to know that I'm Princess and I call the shots around here. And don't forget it, Mungo!
Another element that makes Bethesda's Fallouts instantly recognizable is their environmental and interaction sounds. You can hear the wind howling across the desolate landscape, or your steps pressing on crumbling debris, while 2-century-old, nuclear-powered halogen lamps buzz overhead. The iconic sound of the Pip-Boy torchlight turning on, the bottle cap popping open, quickly followed by the satisfied "ah" after drinking a Nuka-Cola, the pneumatic injection of a steam pack. These are sounds that immediately pull my brain back into the series every time I hear them. Some were born here in Fallout 3 and carried over into the rest of the series. They even made it into the TV show, creating continuity and, let's be honest, a bit of fanservice. Environmental storytelling in this game is not only visual either. Scattered throughout the wasteland are holotapes, forgotten for who knows how long, offering glimpses into other people's life before and after the bombs fell. Some of them tell very tragic stories.
These guys aren't who I thought they were. Jesus, they killed that family for a sack of rotten vegetables. Getting out of here next chance I can without catching a bullet. Hit a caravan today. Trev didn't see the kid and got popped. I took care of Tawny right then and put one in Thor before he saw her fall. That earned me some grub from the traders. Even better, they saw Dad. He was in pretty rough shape and still has the goddamn book. Trader says it gave him the creeps. Me too. But it's good to know he's still alive. Still heading south.
Last but not least, the Fallout 3 soundtrack is legendary. Composed by Inon Zur, a well-recognized name behind all of Bethesda's Fallout scores, as well as Starfield, Dragon Age Origins, EverQuest, Crysis, and a catalog that goes on considerably longer. His work is often described as emotionally dynamic, sophisticated, and evocative. The music is never intrusive. It helps create dramatic tension and works alongside the gameplay rather than overpowering it. Zur worked in close collaboration with the developers to understand how the player should be feeling at any given moment, when they needed to feel lost, when they needed to feel ready for battle, when they needed to feel scared. He drew inspiration from Vietnam War movies, which made use of unconventional sound effects woven into their scores. He took that sensibility and used it to build something dark and apocalyptic, carrying a deep feeling of hopelessness. He also experimented with instruments like the harmonica and the Hawaiian guitar to achieve, in his own words, this almost underwater, all-western bar kind of feel. And to give a personal example, I find the menu music incredibly emblematic. It gives this deep, visceral feeling of unease, and paired with the ambient sounds of the title screen, it's one of the most memorable menu soundtracks of my gaming life, up there with the original Baldur's Gate menu. Finally, the game's radio stations deserve to be mentioned. Accessible from the Pip-Boy, they serve different purposes depending on which one you tune into. Enclave Radio lets you learn about the faction through its own propaganda. Distress signals can lead you to quests when you enter certain locations. And then there's the option to simply wander the wasteland to the sound of original recordings from the 40s and 50s, like I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire or Maybe by the Ink Spots, this last one reprised from the first game. These tracks deepen the series' 30s through 50s Americana vibe considerably, and they're unmistakably Fallout to anyone who knows the series. I personally find that having the radio on breaks the immersion, especially when sneaking, so I rarely tune in, but I understand exactly why those songs have become inseparable from the franchise. By now, we know that Fallout 3 has a lot to offer within its base game, but Bethesda didn't stop there. Fallout 3 received 5 DLCs from Bethesda, quite a hefty amount for the time. They were all released between January and August 2009, in this order: Operation Anchorage, The Pit, Broken Steel, Point Lookout, and Mothership Zeta. I played them all in order. By a long-established tradition, it's best to approach them at a certain suggested levels, but I did things my own way, as is often the case. Let's start with what someone may consider a strange take. Operation Anchorage is one of my favorite DLCs for this game. You stumble upon a group of Brotherhood outcasts trying to enter a sealed armory, but they're stuck and need a computer interface to do so, which your Pip-Boy 3000 can provide. You enter a virtual reality simulation, living through a reconstruction of one of the greatest battles of 2076, the liberation of Anchorage, Alaska, from the Chinese Communist occupation. This DLC received some flack at the time due to its linear nature and the fact that it strips your character of their equipment to better put you in the shoes of a Special Forces operator participating in the mission. You have to make do with what you find and what the story makes available to you. It plays somewhat like Doom, working through weapons picked up as you progress, health and ammo dispenser included, so the critiques are not unfounded. But I loved it because it was a different take on Fallout, playing it in a slightly different way and having you experience a reconstruction of one of the most impactful historical moments of the setting. And Bethesda wasn't new at making boomer shooters out of their IPs. Once you gain access to the armory, the outcasts have a disagreement and start shooting each other. I guess Elder Lions was faring better without them. Here you have access to some sweet rewards, like the Gauss rifle and the winterized T-51B power armor and helmet, which notably never break. We don't know if by design or by bug. It's a very sweet deal, since it's not that easy to find Brotherhood power armor to cannibalize for parts. The second DLC is The Pit. You are contacted by Werner, a former slave turned freedom fighter, who wants to liberate the workers enslaved to produce steel in a settlement built over the ruins of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You enter disguising yourself as a slave, once again losing all your gear. A certain Lord Asher rules the place with an iron fist, maintaining order where chaos once reigned and keeping the steelworks functional. Neither captives nor captors are safe, since a disease makes people feral and bestial, transforming them into monsters that prey on the living. These creatures, called trogs, are a result of the region's water pollution and the common horror sci-fi staple. Through surviving the gladiatorial fights you have to win to earn a meeting with the Lord Asher, you discover something horrible. His newborn daughter appears immune to the disease that eventually claims everyone, and she needs to be studied for a potential cure. Here you're faced with a terrible choice. Allow Asher to continue to rule, condemning the slaves to their fate but potentially curing the disease, or steal the baby, deliver her to Werner, and support the slave rebellion, putting an end to Asher's rule. And Werner will eventually release the trogs on the settlement, killing everyone. This DLC is generally held in high regard, filled with atmosphere and built around the final choice that decides the fate of the entire place. The problem, to me, is that there is no good choice here. All options are the lesser evil. If you're playing an evil or neutral character, no problem. But if you're playing a good one, the game thoroughly screws you. And as Geralt of Rivia once put it, if I'm to choose between one evil and another, I'd rather not choose at all. The third DLC is Broken Steel, my favorite, since it fixes the game's ending, adds a significant amount of new content, and concludes the Brotherhood and Enclave conflict once and for all. The additional content greatly changes the experience, sparing the Long Wanderer from death at the end of the main story. You wake up in the Brotherhood of Steel infirmary instead, next to Sarah Lyons, who took a severe dose of radiation too. From there, you join the Brotherhood in hunting down the Enclave remnants. The level cap is raised to 30, which also brings new perks, but it comes with some drawbacks. New enemies are added, and some scale so badly with your level, like the albino red scorpions, the feral ghoul reavers, and the super mutant overlords, that they become artificial bullet sponges, more tedious than threatening. This is one perfect example of why I believe enemies should not scale with your character in RPGs. Setting-wise, you see the consequences of your choices. If you infected the water with the FEV virus, the wasteland reflects that. If you didn't, James' sacrifice bears fruit as pure water is delivered by Brotherhood-controlled caravans operating out of the Jefferson Memorial. You can help escort those caravans and eventually gather advanced technology for the Brotherhood before taking the fight to the main Enclave base, Adams Air Force Base. You infiltrate the facility while the Brotherhood mounts a diversion at the gates, and the base is a sprawling area filled with the Enclave soldiers, scientists, automated defenses, and deathclaws they're attempting to control. You eventually bring the whole thing down with an airstrike, and Elder Lions couldn't be prouder. The airstrike can also be used on the Brotherhood Citadel, crippling their operation on the East Coast and turning their patrols in the Wasteland hostile. The fourth DLC is Point Lookout, my least favorite, since in my opinion it doesn't add much to the overall experience beyond the large new map. You board the boat and reach the homonymous swamp region of the state park, which covers roughly 1/5 of the original Fallout 3 map, but lacks the same location density. The area wasn't hit by the bombs, but became a textbook backwater, inbred and mutated swamp folk, moonshiners, and eldritch horror cults. The story follows a rivalry between Desmond, a rough pre-war ghoul, and Professor Calvert, a mad scientist who transferred his brain into a tank. You choose a side and destroy the other. One moment that does stand out is a quest that subjects your character to a forced lobotomy, having you go through a series of hallucinations hinting at the surgery. I understand that many people enjoy this DLC for its open map and atmosphere, but for me, beyond a few memorable locations, the tropes on display felt too familiar. I've seen inbred backwater communities and eccentric pre-war remnants done and redone across too many games and movies to find much freshness here. The last DLC is Mothership Zeta. You are kidnapped by aliens and have to escape their spaceship. You can find some strong weapons here to bring back to the Capital Wasteland, and there are a few interesting moments, including unfreezing companions pulled from every place and time on Earth, collected by the aliens over centuries, and a little girl who helps you escape by crawling through spaces you can't fit into. Another clear nod to aliens. But I didn't enjoy this DLC much overall. It's repetitive in its area design and feels like one extended joke. The topic of aliens in Fallout has always been a touchy subject. In the original game, the UFO crash encounter was added as a joke and nothing more, giving you a sweet weapon and a fuzzy painting. Of Elvis, if I remember correctly. They built on it with the Avrengost in Fallout 2, which already felt a little tacky. Here in Fallout 3, not only does the DLC canonize aliens, observing and studying humanity like guinea pigs, but Audio Log 17 raises the possibility that the Great War was started by them, having extorted the US nuclear launch codes from a kidnapped official. This undermines the core themes of the series entirely. The war never changes model, and the idea that humanity did it to itself are foundational, raising the possibility that the blame lies with an external force pulls the rug out from under a lot of what makes this setting so compelling. Ultimately, the DLCs tell you a lot about what Bethesda was willing to try. What Fallout 3 as a whole left behind is a different conversation. Considering Fallout 3 from a distance, 18 years later, we can clearly see how successful the game was. The last publicly available figures date from November 2015, telling us that it sold 12 million copies. Almost 5 million of those were sold in the first week, generating over 300 million in sales. Its production cost was never made public, but by most estimates it was less than Fallout 4, which reportedly cost around 120 million. It was certainly a commercial success. It also won multiple Game of the Year awards and several BAFTAs. It was almost universally celebrated, but at the same time it created a profound division. Fallout 3 saved the franchise, but that salvation came at a permanent cost, a split in the fanbase that never healed, and it remains its most enduring legacy. We can't deny that Fallout was a dying franchise in Interplay's hands. They handed the keys to Bethesda, a moment in video game history that raised the question of whether a beloved CRPG series could survive becoming a first-person open-world game, and the answer was resoundingly positive. But fans of the original Fallout 1 and 2 largely rejected Fallout 3, arguing that's a shallow game that stripped the series of its reactivity, moral complexity, and dark humor. There is a hardcore community that genuinely despises Bethesda's work, condemning it as heresy with religious fervor. Nevertheless, new players discovered the franchise through it and loved it. I'm one of them. That divide has never fully healed, and it shaped how later titles like Fallout 4 were both received and designed. Obsidian's New Vegas can be seen as a direct response to Fallout 3. Bethesda handed development to Obsidian, staffed in part by Black Hull veterans who had worked on the cancelled Van Buren. They aimed at restoring what was present in the original games and absent in Fallout 3. Factions with moral ambiguity, a more reactive world, skill checks that matter, and a protagonist who wasn't a blank slate vault dweller. That's why New Vegas is largely considered the best Fallout game ever made, or at least the best among the open world ones. The irony is that New Vegas would never have existed without Fallout 3's success, and Bethesda lending the license to Obsidian to develop what you might call a sequel or a spin-off. Fallout 4 was also a huge success, arguably overshadowed by The Witcher 3 releasing in the same year. The series' renaissance, brought forth by Bethesda, eventually led to the Amazon TV series adaptation, which became another major success for the franchise, even if through a different medium. For better or worse, Fallout 3 locked in the Bethesda signature for the Reborn series: wide open world, light RPG mechanics, and exploration over narrative depth. Its legacy is Bethesda's design philosophy stamped onto the franchise, for every player who followed to either embrace or push back against. Looking back at all of it now, having seen everything the game has to offer, that tension makes a little more sense to me. I can understand the criticism that hardcore fans of the original titles put forward, but I don't consider what Bethesda did heretical or something worthy of being burned at the stake. I'm being slightly hyperbolic, but the developers received death threats over it, and it's documented that at least one individual showed up to their offices protesting aggressively. I don't engage with games as a tribal exercise. I play them to enjoy myself. So I take Fallout 3 for what it is and appreciate what was done with it. And with that, it's time to wrap things up. I've played Fallout 1 and 2 before coming here. You can find my videos on both, and I deeply appreciated them for what they were. Games that trusted you to create your own story through the choices they gave you, where a different character build wasn't just a different set of numbers, it was a very different life in the wasteland. I did 6 playthroughs of Fallout 2 before covering it. 6, because each one felt substantially different. I even tried a charisma run, what I called the hypocrite pacifist, a character who only had her companions fight for her. The companions AI made it a real ordeal, but it was worth exploring. The original Fallout let me go further still. A true pacifist run. No kills. The game allowed it. I tell you all this because I want you to understand where I'm standing when I say Fallout 3 is still my favorite Fallout. It was my first. It came at a particular moment in my life, and I didn't have a ton of games back then. I came to the isometric titles many years later. So yes, there is something personal here. But throughout this retrospective, I try to detach myself from that and present the good parts together with the bad ones. I don't need the game to be perfect for it to be one of my favorites, nor do I need my opinions to align with the majority. I don't belong to the echo chambers that consider the isometric Fallouts the only games worth existing, nor am I a blind Bethesda fan. I love their games for the sceneries, the exploration, and their sandbox nature, but I'm also well aware of their limitations. Fallout 3 doesn't go as deep as what came before it. It gives you a vast sandbox, the freedom to live whatever life you want in the capital wasteland, but a new character with a different build doesn't offer a meaningfully different experience. You can blow things up, commit atrocities, play the hero, but the world doesn't change itself around who you are the way it did before. That's the loss. And after all the hours spent here, I think that loss is real and worth considering. I often heard the expression wide as the ocean, deep as a puddle used to describe Bethesda's games, and I see where that comes from. I don't even disagree with it, but I don't feel like taking sides. Fallout 3 is not better than what came before it. It's different. It gained something and it lost something. What it gained was a world you experience rather than just navigate. A wasteland that feels present around you, that rewards curiosity, that pulls you into its ruins and its survivors, and its quiet tragedy in a way the isometric games never quite managed. I loved being in the capital wasteland. I still do, and sometimes it's just good to wear the Brotherhood power armor and bring order and peace to the wasteland, at least in your headcanon. So here's where I land after everything. Fallout 3 is a flawed game. It's also worth every hour. Not despite its flaws, but alongside them, as a document of a franchise finding a new shape, and of a wasteland that, for all its imperfections, still had something honest to say about the world it was imagining. I consider it an evolution. The king is dead, long live the king. And with that said, I'll step away from the capital wasteland for now. I like to cover games in release order, so you already know what's coming next in the Fallout series. I am Avrengost, a completionist gamer who covers Western RPGs regardless of their age or production size. If you like my content, consider subscribing to the channel, it helps a lot. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.